Hello and welcome to the Fellowship Phase, an Adventures in Middle-earth podcast. I'm Josh and that's Callum. And we're going to give you inside information on how to find your own path through Tolkien's world.
When the realm of Arnor ended long ago, the Dunedain of the North did not abandon their struggle against the enemy, but passed into the shadows and out of the history of most men and elves. Severely diminished in number, they became a secret people, wandering in disguise amongst crumbling walls and ruined towers. For almost 1,000 years they dwelt in these hidden places, in lonely woods and silent hills, but they never ceased to keep watch over the borders of their former kingdom as the Rangers of the North.
Hello, Callum.
Hello, Brendan.
Hello, Callum and Josh. Nice to be here.
Welcome, welcome. It's good to see you both. Are you both well?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Callum, yours was far from enthusiastic. Are you excited to do the podcast?
Yes.
I feel like I'm at the MC at some kind of stand-up gig or something.
We can't hear you. I'll just turn the gain up on my microphone.
While I'm doing the preamble as the MC, I have to shout out to Stuart, who's one of our previous guests and one of our players, who has very kindly acquired for me a copy of the Adventures of Middle-earth Player's Guide, which, as I've mentioned before, I didn't have in physical form. I only had a PDF of it, which was not the easiest to navigate. So, Stuart, thank you very much. It's here. It will be a reference, and I feel this is the way forward in life now, having these physical books that I can read. I think it'll really catch on.
Yeah, I've got a photo of Josh receiving said book, and he looked ecstatic.
I'm ecstatic. I just felt I had to shout that and say that. Why don't we talk about why we're here? Brendan is one of one of your players, Callum, one of our companions.
One of the players.
One of the players. What are we here to talk about? Drum roll.
Well, we've invited Brendan on to talk about Harefoot. We can't use his real name because it's a secret. Or maybe we can. What was your character's real name? Harefoot's code name.
My character's real name is Malbeth, but he goes by a pseudonym because of his background of being hunted by the enemy.
And how would you say that we, as other players, have been about sticking to the pseudonym and not just calling you Malbeth the entire time?
Absolutely awful. Even within a single kind of conversation, it switches back and forth hundreds of times. Probably shouldn't have just told you my real name in the first place.
Yeah.
Things better.
If you can't trust a man in Middle-earth, then where can you trust him? Hey ho. So, Malbeth, a Dunedain wanderer. We can run through class creation and some of the sort of inspiration for the character, and then I think both Cal and I have got lots of questions about your experience within the game, your experience within a party that has another wanderer, and as you already know, we're mad keen on the journey rules and the wanderer class anyway. So there's lots to talk about. We can get stuck in. Callum, how shall we kick off?
Well, I thought we'd kick off just having a little bit of a dive into the Dunedain culture and the culture of which is associated with it, because it would form an underpinning to then bounce into Malbeth as a character and how he came about. So, what, Brendan, inspired you? What made you choose to play as a Dunedain from the get-go when you made this character? Who's been your character throughout the game so far?
So I really like the kind of lore of Arnor as this kind of fallen kingdom with the remnants of the Dunedain living there. I always thought that was really captivating, and obviously there's elements of it that kind of are woven through mainly Lord of the Rings, but a little bit touches on kind of the Shire and the Hobbit kind of area. I just thought that the kind of the lore there is really captivating, and it really encapsulates for me the idea of what a wanderer is, I mean, I think that the character of Strider in the Lord of the Rings is almost the archetype of what a wanderer is.
Absolutely. And I think having that background of the mystery and the intrigue behind the dour and rugged exterior, that elegance and kinglyship that Aragon has, which is hidden by the rough exterior, that gem in the rough sort of character trope. Did that inspire you at all creating Malbeth?
I mean, I think you've got to engage with that on some level for a Dunedain character. I mean, the kind of the theme is obviously that the Dunedain are former lords of Arnor. They're all from this kind of slightly rarefied background. So you've got to I think it's important to think about how your character fits into that kind of legacy. And that's kind of a key part of doing the characters. I suppose it's both a good thing and a bad thing, because I think that it can make for an interesting character backstory, but it also means that you're probably maybe a little bit more limited in what the character's backstory can be compared to someone from one of the more urban settings, like, Dale or something like that, where you could be from any class of society.
Kind of picking from a smaller pool of characters, really, isn't it? Even though they're fictional and imagined characters, the pool of people you realistically could be is not gigantic. Was the starting point for you that you wanted to be a Dunedain, or was it you wanted to be a ranger? Which way round? They do naturally fit together, I think. Which way round did you come at that?
Definitely Dunedain first. It was that. Like I said, I really like the lore element of it, and it was going to the lore and then looking at what I wanted, the way I wanted the character to play, and then looking at a class that kind of matched up with that.
And so the Dunedain traits is pretty powerful. You get an increase in wisdom and constitution by 1, and you get an additional 2 ability scores to increase by 1. So I think you get more ability score improvements than some of the other cultures. Is that right?
It is. I know, because actually we recently played a one-shot, a couple of us, and I played as a Dunedain. So it was the first time I'd used them, mechanically speaking. And yes, they get 3 ability points at the beginning, but, and I discovered this because making a one-shot character, I wanted to...
Is it not 4? Wisdom by 1, constitution
Wisdom
by
2. Sorry.
Okay.
4, yes.
4.
You're completely right.
Well, edit
4. But none of them go up by 2. So you are more powerful, but it's harder. And I found this making a character for one shot where I really wanted to focus on one thing. You can't bump 2 points at the beginning into one thing, which I thought was interesting, that they are, and this is something Stuart spoke about with Wanderers, kind of good across the board. They, someone who could survive on their own.
Yeah, the one shot was quite high level, and I don't know what my point was there. I've forgotten. I was going to say I tend to go for point buy when I'm running a game, just because it doesn't get into like issues with rolling ability scores, and I just can't. There's too many other things to think about. I can't get into that. So, but I know that Josh is much more of a fan of rolling for ability scores because there's a lot more drama in that, and I can understand why. But so the Dunedain, they're a bit older, so 18 to 60 is their suggested adventuring age, which is interesting. I think it gives you the idea to maybe, we were saying that limited character options, but I guess you can play as that older character. You did that sort of thing with Theodric, Josh, but I guess, you could play as an older Dunedain who's still very much in their prime.
My understanding, and certainly, I mean, Aragorn is obviously, spoilers for the book, quite old. Is that a trait that's spoilers for the book, in case you've not read Lord of the Rings? But is that a trait that's true across the board for Dunedain? Would Dunedain live longer than other men?
Can I interject my recollection of the lore? Although I'm always happy to be corrected about this, because I'm sure someone's got a more in-depth answer. Is that Dunedain, as a rule, are more long-lived? I think about twice as long-lived as normal men. but Aragorn, being of kingly stock, is even more so.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be like a genetic thing. It seems to just be how well they envisage and embody the ethos of being a Dunedain sometimes. Because Aragorn, lives a lot longer than his ancestors have. Although I guess father and grandfather both died quite young and in unfortunate circumstances. So, yes, and you're generally quite tall. You get proficiency in history and also in survival. You can speak Cinder and Westron, and you get 1 cultural virtue to start. So not only do you get 4 ability score improvements, but you also get a cultural virtue, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it's really cool.
It is very cool.
And maybe that's a sign to segue into the cultural virtues.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
So, Brendan, what did you start off with? What was your starting cultural virtue for Malbeth?
That's an excellent question, Callum. Oh, yeah, my initial cultural virtue was sterner than steel.
Oh, yeah.
So essentially what this virtue is that you gain resistance to corruption, you increase your wisdom by 1 point, and get advantage on wisdom saving throws against corruption.
Wow. Which is really interesting when we talk about some moments of Malbeth later on, and actually was quite severely affected by corruption at one point. Although I think any character in that situation would have had a hard time resisting. Sterner than steel. So yeah, that's why did you choose that one initially?
I suppose that the kind of the essence of the Dunedain is not just about the kind of physical ability, but about that kind of resilience. The idea that they I'm going to make a hash of it, but there's a line in a kind of a throwaway line that Aragorn makes in The Lord of the Rings about what it is that the Dunedain do. And he's in Bree, and everyone's been quite scathing of the Rangers. And he gives a throwaway line to Barlaman about how the Rangers are out in the wild protecting people against things that they wouldn't imagine in their nightmares. That the idea that the key element of the Dunedain is actually directly facing the shadow. And that's kind of part of the raison d'etre of them. So I felt that was quite important to kind of convey a sense of just being that a little bit more resilient in the face of evil and darkness. Didn't pan out like that, but that was the idea.
He did resist it a lot. It's just events unfurled in a way that were really problematic. Did you take any other of the Dunedain cultural virtues as things went along?
Yeah, I took loads actually. Whenever we had the opportunity to take virtue of any kind, I always went for a Dunedain cultural virtue because I think that they're all very thematic. So there was only one of the cultural virtues that I didn't take.
Wow.
Development arc.
Okay, so do you want to talk us through, I don't know if you remember which order you took them in or just any order you chose, like what they did and why you took them or what you thought the idea of them was.
Yeah, so the second one that I took was Royalty Revealed. So this is a quite an interesting one. Essentially that you use a bonus action to reveal your royal heritage as a member of the Dunedain in battle. And then all allies get a hit point boost, 1d6 plus your charisma modifier. And all enemies within 10 feet have to make a wisdom saving throw or become frightened. So it's quite good. It's also got a kind of a social encounter, which I have to say ended up coming up less often for Malbeth. But yeah, I think it's interesting because I suppose it's it really came into kind of the character at the point where he ended up with a kind of a relic sword of Numenor, and the connection was really with the two. The relic sword had an additional ability. I don't know if you want me to spoil it now.
Go for it, yeah.
That if you said a few words in kind of the ancient Numenorean language, it would glow bright white, And so I'd kind of worked out as a combo of this revealing the kind of Dunedain ancestry of Malbeth. So that would be I think I ended up doing it about 3 times or something over the course of our campaign. But his signature move when times were tough was to try and rally them all with this battle cry and terrifying the enemies nearby.
He was a real character for like really bad moments and either turning up unexpected or being right in the thick of it, and these really clutch moments. And I guess that's part of like the rules. You know, I guess normal D&D, you know, you've got your short rest or long rest recurring things, and because long rests are easy to come by, there's not many abilities that characters have that feel special. I don't know how you both feel about this, but
it's a bold claim.
Well, like, you know, as a warlock, you've not got many spell slots, but then you just fire off and you just short rest.
I actually understand what you mean. I think the realism of, if that's the right word for it, of the resting rules in this mean you use your abilities less and you save them much longer. And I think because of that, you only deploy them at like a moment where it's crucial, and it lends itself then to having these really like backs against the wall, finally activate your ability, turn the tide kind of moment, which is really exciting.
I think it is. I think when we were doing our, I don't know if you've covered it yet, but when we were doing our long slog through
Mount
Gundabad, yeah. It was always a question of, is this particular disaster in the middle of a bad enough disaster to use this type of ability? But I think there was something slightly chicken and egg about it, because after this ability kind of came into Malbeth's armory, it was around about the time when I stopped being able to play quite as often as before, and Malbeth started being a character who would come and go quite a lot, and often Callum would tip me off a week or 2 in advance saying, "Oh, there's going to be a really, really critical game. Things are going really badly wrong for everyone. Do you want to come along?" And so, I would appear, and we really played it the first couple of times. Like, Callum would start the game and 7 or whenever, and I would be on WhatsApp, and Callum would be like, "Yeah, you join now," so that everyone would be surprised. And then, so that Malbeth's role kind of gradually evolved from being a kind of a regular member of the party to the guy who shows up when everything's going wrong. And so the abilities started to change to kind of match that.
I love those moments. I think those are some of my favorite moments, to the point where it was like everyone knew it was coming sometimes, because it was like, things are really bad. Where's Malbeth?
The funny thing is, to an extent, there was a like, oh, look, Malbeth's here at the last minute to save the day, which sometimes is what it felt like. What it also felt like, though, was that you brought trouble with you. That often, I think, as a character, my various characters I've played felt like we're only in this much trouble when Malbeth is here. Like it follows Malbeth to us rather than you coming to save the day. So I don't think it was too much like Deus Ex Machina, you coming in to save the day. I think sometimes we thought, oh no, here we go again.
Ill news is an ill guest, as they say.
Exactly.
Oh man. So that was royalty revealed. What was another virtual that you took?
So the next one I'd taken was the Dauntless Guardians. This one is an interesting one because it's got 3 phases, and the idea is that you expand it over fellowship phases. The first phase is see the unseen. So it's about seeing ghosts and spirits. So you essentially, obviously in kind of Tolkienian lore, there's the world of the seen, the everyday, and the world of the unseen with wraiths and, all sorts. So the first element is being able to see beyond kind of the world of the sea, which was a bit niche, but I think that I was kind of moving towards that as something which Malbeth was. Obviously, when I'd created Malbeth, his known lands had been based around Angmar, and that kind of very much haunted, shade-infested. And it was really to try and lean more into that element of the character, to kind of, again, the idea of being someone who doesn't just stand against kind of ordinary evil, but the kind of the shadow itself.
And I guess, did you have your eye, because I think you probably did, but in terms of, so Malbeth's like motivation for being out adventuring, there's this whole thing, the lore about Dunedain going off and doing some travel, like Aragorn goes off and does some travels, and I think that's talked about in that, the Dunedain will go off and travel for a while to gain some experience and then come back and serve. And so did you sort of have an eye on the future as well with Malbeth, these abilities, like what's actually going to serve him well when he goes back to his job?
Yeah. There is a bit of that. I think, that you're right, that I did from the very start have an idea that he was coming to Wilderland, in a phase of kind of wandering in order to prepare for being a ranger. So it was with a view to that. Also, part of me did think it was quite cool to be able to see ghosts and spirits and things.
So you get to see ghosts, and you can make an intelligence lore ability check to get additional information. And then the second level, did you get to the second and third level or not?
Well, yes and no. Basically, within the scope of our campaign, no. But something happened at the very end, and I'm not going to say it at the moment because I'm sure we'll come on to it later when we get to the end of the character's arc, where we kind of said, yeah, I've got level 2 and 3 now. But it was, so not really, but kind of.
But he was heading in that direction.
He was heading in that direction.
Yeah.
That was his aim overall.
Just reading.
Hey, that's the name of the game. Oh, right, no, sorry.
Well, we can come back to those abilities when we talk about them at the end. So the next one in the book is Endurance of the Dunedain.
So that was the last one.
Wow, this one. I'm just remembering when this one came up.
This one, what it is that it's basically, the idea is that you're not just kind of determined, but you're also physically hardy. So if you are effective, you're reduced to 0 hit points. So long as you're not outright killed, you can spend inspiration to stabilize yourself and continue to act normally, which is, it is really cool, is really thematic, and kind of, again, one of those things which, if you're facing dire odds, is really useful. In the game, though, I waited so long to use it because it's kind of very much a sort of a last gasp. And it did mean that I spent ages sitting on a point of inspiration, because I just the thought in my mind was, I could spend it to make this attack roll go off. But what if I die?
Yeah. I'm just remembering that there was a point where we were in Gundabad, and I think everybody was less than 20 hit points. And Malbeth was Malbeth on 0? Someone was on 0 for quite a long time.
Malbeth did go down to 0, yeah. So that happened in the almost just before the very end, the very kind of climax. It was and
then I think Runan was on 2, Halmir was on like 5. It was just, and it wasn't like I wasn't going easy on people. Like I wasn't not targeting people because they had low hit points.
No, you certainly won't, because
it was absolutely terrifying. I didn't want anyone to die, but I was just like, well, And
I hadn't told you about the ability, so I think that you could have read it off my character sheet, but I'm not sure that it was you giving me an opportunity to use the ability so much as it was you doling out attacks.
Yeah, you just popped back, and I was like, wow. I have to admit, like, I don't, there's a lot to think about when you're running the game and preparing for it. So I don't keep a complete oversight on everyone's abilities, which does mean that sometimes we've forgotten to use things, and people haven't always had the benefit of their abilities. But I like it when someone surprises me with something that's awesome. So next we've got Foresight of the Kindred. Is this the one that you didn't take?
This is the only one that I didn't take.
Although in the one shot we played recently, this is the virtue that I did take.
Oh, well, maybe Josh can talk about it.
So, Foresight of the Kindred. Some Dunedain still have the power of their ancestors in their blood, in their heritage, and as part of that can catch glimpses of the future in dreams and visions. The ability, mechanically, you upgrade your wisdom score by 1, and once every adventuring phase, you may invoke your power of foresight by spending inspiration. And when you do, the lore master should give you a relevant piece of information about something that might or will happen in that adventuring phase looking ahead. The rules suggest you won't see exactly what's likely to happen, but you might get like a clear image of a place or someone you can trust or can't trust. If there isn't information available, or in other words, if the lore master doesn't have or would prefer not to give you some information, you can instead basically choose to automatically succeed at an attack roll, saving throw, or ability check at some point on the adventure.
It's pretty cool.
It's very cool.
That is cool.
I did feel like, so Malbeth the Seer is a character from the Fall of Arthedain, one of the last kingdoms of Arnor. And I did wonder if, Brendan, you like ever thought about taking this as like an ode to Malbeth the Seer, or was that something? It doesn't really fit into the vision of the character, I guess.
No, not really. Sorry.
That's fine. So, and then that's all the cultural virtues. I was going to say that's final one, but that's all of them.
Yeah, that's it.
So overall, Dunedain cultural virtues, yay or nay?
I think they're very powerful, very thematic.
Yeah, well, I took all but one of them. What can I say?
Hoarding them. So that's the cultural virtues and the culture. So maybe we can talk a bit about Malbeth's class as a wanderer. So I think we talked briefly on episode earlier on about the fact that we had 2 wanderers in the party, and Josh was saying that it never really felt that they overlapped in role too much. And then after we talked about that, I realized that Brendan and I had done some discussion on Malbeth to try and avoid that eventuality. And I was wondering if we can just hark back to those discussions and what we did and decided to make them feel special and different, and what advice we might give to others playing with multiple the same class in a party.
Oh, so we'd had 2 wanderers in from the beginning, and it worked fairly well. You could one would take the kind of the guide role on journeys, and the other would fill a different role, and it would work pretty well. I think they're both kind of decent combat characters. As you say, the wanderer class is quite well rounded, so they're both useful. I think when I noticed things starting to overlap between mine and Runan's character was when we got to that kind of specialization kind of field. There's only 2 for Wanderer. There's, I think it's Hunter of Beasts and Hunter of Shadows, I think are the 2.
Yeah.
Basically, we'd both gone for the shadow option, which made pretty good sense, I think, for both characters thematically. But it started to be that we were both getting the same bonuses. And Runan is a very different character to Malbeth. So there wasn't, in social situations, we were quite differentiated, but it was starting to be that we both had the same abilities, and with some of the ranger abilities like Rumour of the Earth, which is the ability where you listen to the ground to try and hear what's going on. We just ended up doing it at the same time and helping it around quite a lot, which was all right. But it, I suppose that I started thinking about the idea that we should maybe try and do something to differentiate Malbeth from Runan a bit more.
Yeah.
And then we moved into that phase where I wasn't able to kind of join every session, so Malbeth was kind of coming and going a bit more, and we had this. It ended up in this situation where Malbeth would often come when the others were in need of help, essentially, to try and kind of protect them or whatever it was. And so I'd started thinking about kind of different ways of doing that. And I'd been looking at the different class options that I'd been thinking about when I'd made Malbeth. And I'd been looking at, but what we ended up doing was we ended up not multi-classing Malbeth, but rather we used one of the class specializations from another class and adapting it to Malbeth. So Malbeth became a wanderer with the bounder specialization from Warden.
This is interesting. I was not aware of this at all. This behind the scenes jiggery pokery that had gone on.
So it meant I had to drop lots of really, really nice damage bonuses, which came with the Hunter of Evil. So that was annoying. But the abilities for the Bounder it's all about, so you're protecting people walking the edge of the wild, which is very on theme for being a ranger. But the in kind of early abilities are Guardian. So when a creature you see attacks a target within 5 feet of you, you can use your reaction to impose disadvantage on the attack roll. And at 7th level, Ceaseless Guard. So you can use your action to interpose yourself in front of an attack made for another person. You need to make a dexterity saving throw. So because Malbeth's kind of character had become more of this trying to protect the others, that they felt quite natural.
Did you notice? You didn't notice that as another player, Brendan? Josh,
I as another player did not particularly recognize. Maybe I consciously did not recognize the different abilities, but then maybe partly that's down to how we play. I don't know how much we're often explicitly stating the rules as we do them.
That's true.
And character-wise, Runin and Malbeth felt so different anyway that it didn't they just seemed as very different people doing different things. So now I think about it, I suppose, yes, actually there were times where you were doing quite distinctly different things. And some of those abilities actually happened as some of my favorite Malbeth moments, which I think we'll wrap up with when we come to a close. And I just hadn't really been aware that they were things that you had slightly homebrewed as being part of Malbeth's development. So I think that worked really well. Certainly as another adventurer watching Malbeth, I think it worked well. Did you feel it worked well for you getting a unique experience?
I think it worked really well. I think that it was really good in terms of developing the character in a way that felt like the direction that the character was going. But I think, I'm quite pleased in a way, Josh, that you didn't notice, because it means that it fit in well with the way that the character was behaving generally.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that was kind of what I was hoping for out of it. So that's really good.
I think there is a more limitation if we compare to 5th edition with D&D, which is what we usually compare to. Just the number of, there's more classes and there's far, far more subclasses. So, there's lots of mix and matching. Multi-classing is more common. There's more feats. There's so many more options. So in AiME, you're presented this limited pool, and that can be a bit of a constraint. But I think because there's so much more control in the role playing, and there's not these huge spells or effects that you can do, that even small differences can come out as being large differences. And also because the backgrounds and the cultures and the cultural virtues are so thematic that, you can have, we did a Dunedain one shot recently, and although there was only 2 characters, you can have very similar rules, but still manage to feel like distinct characters. But sometimes, I guess feeling free to homebrew and come up with new ideas and adjust things is fine as well. I keep thinking could we bring in some D&D 5th edition rules? But I'm always a bit reluctant, because I think if it's something that's in AiME already, then I'm it's going to be balanced, or mostly will be balanced. Some of the things I feel a bit unbalanced sometimes, which we'll come on to when we talk about warriors. But in general, I think, bringing in stuff like Battle Master from 5th edition, which we've talked about, Josh, I just worry, is that going to break the game balance? I don't know.
I mean, I think that's a huge thing. And I think that when we were talking about this, we spent a long time talking about, the balance of it. And because I think that whenever you have a character, you want them to have limitations as well as strengths.
Yes.
And I think that the character is as much about what people can't or won't or aren't able to do as it is about what they are able to do.
Yeah.
I'm really aggressively nodding along.
Yes, it's so true that you kind of have to have failings, and because otherwise you're just like, I do the thing and there's no challenge. So that's so true.
And so when we were doing this, that we thought for a while about whether it was the right thing to do, but also about whether it would affect the relative power of Malbeth. And I think ultimately we kind of decided that it wouldn't, but obviously whenever you kind of change the rules like this. So for example, the Ceaseless Guard involves using the Warden's Gift dice, which is obviously a Warden feature. So we needed to spend a while thinking about how we were going to adapt that to a Wanderer. And we ended up saying when you're in your known lands, you can do it. So it's got a similar restriction on it. But making sure that those restrictions are balanced is tricky because the classes work very differently to each other.
Yeah, it was quite fun. And I guess we'll have Brendan on in a future episode because Brendan is the other player who has run a game of Adventures in Middle-earth as lore master. And so I think homebrewing and coming up with ideas is a place that you're very comfortable in. So segue into that.
I love homebrewing. Yeah. Very happy to talk about that.
Just while we're on this, I wonder, this is something Callum, you and I were talking about the other day, is that there's a new edition, easy for me to say, of AiME on the horizon. I think we're expecting news reasonably soon of it. And we've been talking a bit about which elements of the game Free League, who now have the rights, would be kind of expanding on, because a lot of the rules I don't particularly think need refreshed. I wondered if this is the area that might expand on, actually adding in new subclasses, potentially a couple of new classes and new cultures, and almost expanding sort of sideways. It feels like there's a lot of good stuff in the game already, but I would agree, having made a couple of characters now, if there was scope for some more official material for subclasses, I think that would be really good ground to cover.
I would love that. That's what I wanted to be. I don't know how it's working in terms of like what of the previous material they have access to. I know some of the same designers are still involved, so that's right, isn't it? It's the same main guy. So, I hope that it is an expansion and like they are recognizing that a lot of people really like first edition. So not to just bin it all and bring out some stuff that can add to and supplement rather than wholly replace. But, really excited to find out. So, so that's the background to the next edition. What about the background for Malbeth?
Oh, well played.
That was seamless. I really enjoyed that. So the background for Malbeth is interesting. So, I mean, as I said, there's for Dunedain characters, there's sort of an overarching kind of similarity to where everyone's coming from. I think what is probably interesting about the background is that it did come up in the early part of our campaign, but then it didn't really come up much after that. And that the background for Malbeth was Hunted by the Shadow. And essentially the kind of overarching idea was that Malbeth's choice to wander into Wilderland was not just about wandering and gaining experience, but the particular choice of going there was because Eriador was too dangerous a place to wander in. And the idea was that Malbeth's family particularly had been marked by a pack of wargs and led by a werewolf in Eriador. And so fleeing to Wilderland for this wandering phase was as much about getting away from that. And we had a really interesting part of the campaign really early on where we were attacked by a load of wargs and a werewolf.
It was a great moment.
It was a great moment. But then we got caught up in adventures in Wilderland and we didn't really come back to it. So I think that is probably the one thing that, if I was making Malbeth again, I think both that and beyond wanting to kind of wander and develop in Wilderland, Malbeth didn't have any particular goals to achieve there. And I think the combination that Malbeth's character background, I think, might have worked better in a story set in Eriador than in Wilderland, as in it would have come up and been more relevant. And I think that looking back, maybe Callum, you and I should have talked more about how that was going to fit into the narrative.
Yeah, it's funny because now we talk about all the characters in the background and we talk the same with Runin and with Friedrich, is that I was just like, make a character join the game. And I really didn't think anything about it. I was just like, this is the adventures I'm running. And it was very much at the beginning. And I think a lot of new DMs will be like, this is, here's a story, play it. Rather than that collaborative, okay, get some stuff from that. And it's so different now when I run that someone's bringing a new character. I very much try to have a sit down with them, almost like a session zero for that character, and figure out where they fit in the world. Who do they know? What information do they have? What are their goals? How am I going to tie that into existing campaigns? Which, you see done so incredibly well in Critical Role that it's, they make it look easy, but it is quite a bit of work and thought that needs to go into that. So yeah, sometimes I did feel like, there was some characters' stories that were at the forefront, and then there was other characters that were playing more of the supporting role. And then I think Malbeth, over time, we developed and we came up with some ways to sort of bring you back into the narrative of the story.
Yeah, we did. So we there was I have to say it was a moment of inspiration on your part, Callum, that maybe 2/3, 3/4 of the way into the campaign, we kind of sat down and you said, I've had this brilliant idea for Malbeth. Malbeth has been given a prophecy by Elrond, and you're going to try and get them all back to Rivendell.
I wanted to go to Rivendell so much.
And I wanted to go to Rivendell so much. I mean, it wasn't, totally selfless, because it was again, what would I have done differently about Malbeth? Malbeth's known lands were all in Eriador to begin with. So he was not a particularly useful wanderer at the beginning. It improved over time, but the opportunity to actually use those known lands, which Malbeth had on his character sheet since game one, but they're doing nothing. Oh, I was looking forward to getting to AiME so much.
Yes, and you're actually so much. There was this last ditch run from Gundabad to Rivendell, which is one of those moments where I kind of knew that I wanted you to go to Rivendell, and how much railroading to do and how much gentle prodding and having some player allies essentially to sort of guide the party there. And Malbeth got to use his spirit abilities. He got to use his resistant to corruption. He got to use his wanderer archetypes, his Dunedain alliances, his elven. It was really like because I guess Malbeth is, should we say that? Malbeth is retiring from the party, and it did feel like a last hurrah. Here's all the skills I've learned, and this is how amazing I am, and it was really integral to nobody dying when basically nobody had any hit points at that point, and they were going through very dangerous land.
One of the moments that I really enjoyed was when we came through Gundabad and we were kind of standing on this ledge overlooking Angmar, and it was the end of the session. And Callum, in probably what was a bad lore mastering move, so I apologize for this, Callum, you said you kind of had given me a little bit of space to introduce people to where they were going. And you took the opportunity to go, Mount Gundabad was really bad. This is also going to be awful. Angmar is horrible. It's full of ghosts. Stick with me. It's incredibly dangerous. And I mean, I don't know if that's what you're expecting, Callum. The look on your face did look a little bit like, I'm going to write a story about ghosts now. I wasn't planning.
Oh man. So
as a player, can I just say, that moment was terrifying because Gundabad was nails and we escaped. And I was like, yeah, we've got out the mountain, we'll be fine. Like, we'll just wander down into the green foothills. And then you, our most trusted guide and ally, being like, yeah, this is going to be hell on earth. I was like, oh no, I'm not ready for this.
And I think it was pretty bad as well.
It was.
So bad. But Malbeth got them through it. And there was definitely moments where if you hadn't had those cultural virtues and all those skills you'd gained over the campaign, it would have been much, much worse. People would have died. So Hunted by Shadow gives you proficiency in stealth and survival. And it means that you may count some of the most notable figures of Middle-earth amongst your friends. But most people will go out their way to help you because they recognize that you're someone who's hunted. It's a really intriguing one. I do wish that we brought in. I do have an idea in my head because the name of the werewolf that was hiting you, I think it was not Nagraw, wasn't it? So I was thinking at one point running a one shot with Malbeth as an NPC and the hunt for Nagraw and finally hunting him down a big, a sort of like similar to the one shot you ran for us one time, Josh, in D&D, which was Monster Hunter style.
Witcher style, yeah.
Yeah, so do that, but in an AiME, but maybe have some twists on the way. I think that'd be quite
really
cool.
Good fun.
And Malbeth had been an NPC already in that one shot. He was someone that everybody knew, so.
That was very cool, incidentally. Just as an aside to pull out, doing the Dunedain one shot, it was just me and Stuart as players, and Callum ran it, which I must say was really fun dynamic, having a small party. Like, we got to do loads. But it was, as part of it, it was mentioned that both of us knew Malbeth, and Runan's character had actually spoken to Malbeth about the particular quest that were going on. And this was set later on from our story. It just, again, felt very grounded in Tolkien's world, and then the additional layer of the world that Callum's kind of added to it, just that Malbeth was someone who could just give advice to another adventurer. I loved it. It was a really good reference.
Yeah, and it was about ghosts. It was
about ghosts.
It was to do with Barrow Whites. It was quite good. We'll talk about that one shot. It was the first time we played in person, and after 2.5 years, it was brilliant. But I think that would be a good little episode to do at some point. So we've talked about the background of Malbeth and with written story. So what do
I suppose we kind of started talking about Malbeth's story. I wondered if you were thinking about kind of the Malbeth's arc within the campaign.
Yeah, maybe you could just take us through the arc that Malbeth underwent. Like, what was the development?
Yeah, so Malbeth was a late addition to the party. So you'd done your kind of first adventure through Mirkwood, and I think you were at Stonyford when Malbeth first.
Or Bjorn's Hall. I think they ran into you. Bjorn was like, "Here's some people that are also here." This guy, I don't know if I did that introduction very well.
So he was a relatively late addition, and from that kind of background of being there to wander and gain experience, just kind of slotted in with the party, and had some initial ideas about heading to Dale or the Woodland Realm or something like that, but not very well formed. And then he travelled with the party, but things kind of took an interesting turn in the Gladden Fields escapade.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There was Malbeth underwent some bad times.
Very bad times. So at the Battle of Stonyford, Malbeth did classic, and I think this was actually Malbeth's first appearance where he'd come with some reinforcements for the beleaguered Stonyford, and then we all participated in the big battle. Unfortunately, Malbeth was then knocked unconscious by a ringwraith and unceremoniously dragged away to the ringwraith's lair in the Dwimmerhorn. I was So I remember the moment that I was trying to hold off the ring wraith to give everyone else time to flee into the hall for a last stand, and didn't have the durability.
Yeah, you did a lot of damage, but the ring wraiths have some abilities which are fairly powerful at lower levels in particular. And I think it uses its black breath or something it's called, and just made you unconscious when you had enough corruption points. And I think you'd done your royalty on revealed. So I guess it was as that moment I was like, would they just kill him, or would they take him away and try and turn him into a wraith? And I thought, actually, given your power and that recognize that royalty in you, that it potentially would try and corrupt you in some way, and so rule that it would take you away.
So that escapade at Stony Ford led to the major next section of the campaign, which was rescue Malbeth.
Yep.
Yeah, you ended up having an alternative character, didn't you?
I did.
Yes.
I had a
Bjorning?
I think he might have been a Bjorning, called Ansevald, who was great fun to play. He was a very simple character in that he was someone who had been previously a brigand and was still, in his heart of hearts, a brigand, but also quite like cooking.
Yeah, there's so much role playing about food. He was brilliant. Maybe we'll talk about him in a mini episode in the future. So having to rescue Malbeth was a big part, and that was tied into Saruman and what was going on in the Gladden Fields, and there was a lot of darkness, and I guess it sort of affected Malbeth quite a bit, didn't it? Because he ended up with, I think, a permanent shadow point following that.
He ended up with a permanent shadow point, but it also led to one of my favorite Malbeth moments, which was he came back, they rescued him from the Durmahorn, and brought him back to Stony Ford, and we were all enjoying a lovely fellowship phase. And then it turned out that Malbeth had been bewitched by the Ringwraith with an instruction to burn down Stony Ford.
Oh yeah, I remember this.
I think that's a rule,
So again,
like that's one of the Ringwraith's rules that they have. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brendan, but they have this ability.
Yeah, it is.
It's really cool.
I think it's is it the Black Shadow or Black Breath or something? Basically, if they spend enough time with someone, they can get them to do something. And that person they're a little bit like a sleeper agent in that they're a bit off, they're a bit unhappy. They know that something's not right, but they can't really articulate what it is until it all kind of comes out in the wash. And then, but it was another classic moment of Callum and I conspiring away from the rest of you guys. So I knew that I was going to set fire to Stony Ford midway through your fellowship phase. And do you know what? I spent a lot of time thinking about the most effective way to burn down Stony Ford. And I was slightly peeved, Callum, that you made it easy for them to get out.
I don't remember it being that easy, if I'm honest.
Yeah,
I feel it was pretty stressful.
It was,
I was doing my best to set an encircling fire.
I think it was pretty terrifying for them. Like I think everyone was a bit like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah, as a session, bear in mind we were in the fellowship phase, so it was like a kind of like slightly slower pace, role playing type moment, and then, bam, the village that we ourselves were busy building was on fire.
Yep. And it led to some major character schisms. There were several people in the party who didn't trust Malbeth for a while after that.
Yes, great role playing.
Yeah. So that was it. That was fun. And then after that, we'd gone eastwards through Mirkwood to Dale, which was starting to be the point where I was coming less and less regularly. You guys were still playing on a very, very regular basis. So Malbeth started kind of dropping in and out much more. But it included a memorable kind of game that Callum and I did about what Malbeth was doing during his adventures on his own, which was basically we'd come to Esgaroth and we'd been ambushed by some bandits, and Malbeth had chased them into the underside of the city for two days, something like that.
Yeah.
Which was during a kind of an adventure that we were all on. And then after that ended and you all went on your separate ways, Malbeth went back to hunt them down, which included a solitary kind of journey around the long lake to find their hideout, and ended up taking them out.
I love it. At that time in my head, I really had Malbeth, wearing a black cloak, mysterious, coming and going. In my head was like Batman in Lake Town, and was just there like, the silent guardian watching, enforcing the laws of Vigilante. So the idea that you went into the like Undercity to chase these brigands away is very
yeah, I'm pretty sure I never like directly said that to the party, but there was like rumors or hints, like discussions of things happening, and it was quite like a nice way to keep him connected to the story when you weren't able to be there, and then also like to justify how he would know to turn up to certain situations because he had his ear to the ground and was around and helping in a way, but probably more effective individually a lot of the time, being so stealthy and deadly, I guess.
I think it did a lot to kind of generate an aura, which I think remained for the rest of the campaign. That when I wasn't there, it was because Malbeth was doing something.
Yes, definitely. We always assumed you were doing important things that were changing the world in some way,
which was nice, which was good, and it kind of. I suppose the thing that I liked about it was it gave a life to the character, even in times when I couldn't make it along to session.
Yeah,
which was good.
It was, I think I quite liked trying to get into players' headspaces and role playing their characters for them when they weren't there, and like not doing much. But Malbeth was quite a quiet character anyway, so coming up with like lines or just thinking about like what would he say in the situation, usually something quite serious and maybe a little bit bleak at points as well, given how much darkness he'd seen. But yeah, he was a great character to have along and as a tool to bring in that sort of connect the party to the land.
Then we had a phase of Malbeth kind of appearing and disappearing. The big battle with the men of the south, the mysterious raiders, which was again. It was really good in terms of getting to use that royalty revealed ability. We were getting overwhelmed by these, black Numenorian type men, really.
Umbarians, I guess.
Yeah, and that they were mounted, and it was really they slightly outnumbered us, but they were also just putting up a very good fight. And so getting them to flee, or getting a proportion of them to flee for a while, meant that the numbers were suddenly much more manageable for us. So
you totally turned the tide.
It was really nice to come in and then kind of feel like you're doing a useful role for the party. And then obviously the next big thing was Gundabad.
Yeah, the party knew they needed to go to Gundabad to rescue someone, and Malbeth. I think it was quite late notice that I managed to get you into the game, and you just caught up with them like very close to the entrance to Gundabad. It's just a running joke that you'd sort of been following them and made up ground and somehow managed to find them. And then we're there consistently the whole way through that part of the campaign and then to the end when Malbeth was retiring. So it was a really nice way for him to send off as this like integral part and the skills that you brought in, and some really clutch moments in there. The one where you can interject yourself in.
Yeah, that was so this was when Baranor was captive and we just found him, and it was one of the Umbarians was about to kill him effectively, or at least that's what it looked like.
Yeah, Halmir's uncle, who had been the source of a 20-30 session long quest, and he was just about to be murdered by this NPC who was like, well, I'm not going to live, so I better get rid of this guy. And wow. Malbeth,
who was on 0 hit points. Thanks to him. I use my kind of ability to interject, and if it hadn't been for the actions of one other character, Malbeth would have, may have died himself there as well. But
yeah,
it felt like a really good.
Bert's character Dior then rolled 2 natural 20s at disadvantage to kill the character, and he just got the damage in. Like I think it was like 1 point above the damage he needed to stop this NPC. It was the most clutch moment in any game I've ever seen. It was absolutely amazing.
The whole combination of everything, because it was, like you say, it was like 30 sessions long quest effectively for my character, was to find his uncle who was here in front of us about to die. Malbeth, knowing that, you as Brenda were like, well, he's on 0 hit points. I can interpose myself and will almost certainly die. We didn't have any healing. Like if you died, you pretty much weren't coming back. And you made that sacrifice. You were like, yep, this is what Malbeth would do. Play the character. He would sacrifice himself. But for 2 natural 20s at disadvantage, Malbeth would have been dead. Amazing moment.
Yeah, it was amazing. And I'm very glad for those natural 20s, because then obviously we had some fun roleplay getting out of Dunedain.
Yes.
So maybe talking about, like, we've got through Arc and we'll come on to some other favorite Malbeth moments. Is there anything that you would have done differently in hindsight in creating Malbeth?
I think just the things that we'd already talked about kind of, again, it was when we were all quite new to the game, but thinking about how the background would tie into the story. I think that I'd picked known lands on the basis of what I thought was good characterization, but I think maybe more of a balance between characterization and kind of gameplay.
I do have a question for you, and this is the important question. Does Malbeth know why Laketown is called Laketown?
Does Malbeth know why that Laketown is a town on a lake?
I mean, if you're not sure, that's fine. We've been asking all our guests to get to the bottom of this. It remains our outstanding mystery here in Middle-earth.
I'm not sure that I understand this mystery. Is Laketown not called Laketown because it's a town on a lake?
Oh, you might be onto something there. I need to write this one down. Right, while I write this down, let me ask my other real question, which is what advice you would have for anyone who's listening who wants to make a Dunedain Wanderer, something in that kind of area. Any kind of key piece of advice that you learned from playing and creating Malbeth? I think I probably have a couple of pieces of advice. I think that it is really satisfying playing the classic Ranger wild version of the Dunedain, but I would say that not to be afraid to try other character formats. I think although I said at the start that Dunedain is maybe a bit more limited in terms of the background, that actually I think that it would work quite well for a number of different classes, and you could probably play them in quite a reasonable variety of ways. Kind of a scholarly historian, but thinking of that more as a kind of an interest or something that contributes to the people. Beyond that, I think that sometimes kind of to think about how the character is going to be in, not just in kind of gameplay style and in the background, but also from an RP perspective. I think Malbeth was really, really fun to play and really interesting to play in those kind of high tension scenarios. But he was quite a stoic character. And what that meant was, in RP sessions, I didn't say very much because I sat there being stoic. And so that one of my favorite Malbeth moments was the final Malbeth session in Rivendell, where for the first time in the entire campaign, Malbeth was relaxed. And so me playing Malbeth, I could talk. And did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy the sort of outro from Malbeth at Rivendell relaxed? I remember you said that you were in much, you're in different clothes and everyone was kind of cleaned up being in Rivendell, having wandered through Angmar.
Yeah, I thought it was good, and I can't. Well, I hoped at least that it would kind of. I suppose my concern about the stoicism is that and my worry was that it made Malbeth seem that one-dimensional, and I suppose that it was satisfying to be able to kind of do that as a different part of the character, just because in my mind there was more to Malbeth than just hunting down criminals under Lake Town. He got pretty close to that lake. So yeah, hunting down criminals under Lake Town or arriving to save the party from certain doom. And so it was nice to kind of be able to do that.
Shall we finish on some favourite moments from all of us? I will perhaps go first on one that you elaborated on a little bit, but it was a session when we'd spent a bit of time in the without Malbeth. You hadn't been with us at this point. In the East Bight and the east of Mirkwood, we've been investigating. We got the sense that there was sort of trouble nearby, and we as the party were heading back to the crossing of Kelduin. It was heading there, sensing there might be trouble, that we encountered you, telling us that there was trouble ahead and that the Umbarians, who had kind of been on our trail for quite a long time, had caught wind of us and were imminently coming upon us, and they were on horseback and we were on foot. We had a really good session where you got to kind of come in and started the session by telling us this drama, and there was a kind of swift bit of planning between us all, what we're going to do, and our decision. And I think, Callum, you maybe either used a timer, or you certainly encouraged us to act quickly, urgently. We decided what we do is flee to the eaves of the forest and try and get to the forest, which we knew is dangerous, but that with horses they wouldn't be able to pursue us really. And there was this sort of dramatic chase scene, and they caught us just at the eaves of the forest, these men riding us down on these huge horses. And when you then used your royalty revealed and Gloarin your sword, it was just such a cool moment. It felt great that you'd got to visit us just for like one session. I think you hadn't been in for a while, so it was good that you were playing. And it was just so cinematic. I was getting charged down by these horses who you had alerted us to, and then you were the one to kind of save the day. And if you hadn't been there at all, we definitely would have been killed by the Umbarians. So that was one of my favorite. I think it encapsulated Malbeth's kind of like protecting and there at the right moment sense.
I was going to say the same moments, but I think a close second would have been just the bravery of which Malbeth stood down a ringwraith, and it didn't go well for him, but it was just a great moment. Like, it had been a really tense battle. Everyone was injured. Malbeth was probably doing the best out of everybody. And for a moment I was like, maybe he can do it. And then I think it was basically a saving throw that if you fail, you just went unconscious, and it was over quite quickly. But we'll talk about the ringwraith profiles, I'm sure, in a future episode, and our thoughts on them. But yes, that moment with the ranger stepping forward and saying, "No, I'm going to stand, and this is a fouler thing than just an orc, but this is a role that I can take up." And maybe Malbeth takes away from that and reflects on that experience when he's off working in Angmar as his role as the warden of Angmar in the Frozen Wastes.
I really enjoyed both of those moments, and actually kind of going through the character arc reminds me of the several times in Malbeth's character arc where, I had the opportunity to get Malbeth to interpose himself in a way that was really quite dangerous in order to try and feel like he was doing right by the party. So I was quite pleased with that. I have to say that my favourite moment was actually burning down Stone. I suppose it was just, I think that in part it was because it was so unexpected. I mean, I think the other part of it is that I actually quite like playing villains, and secret agendas are really fun. And, as Callum said, I have enjoyed DMing this game as well, although that happened after. But I quite like that sort of creating the peril. But it was also something about it is very much the antithesis of Malbeth's character. Malbeth is all about protecting people, even at kind of the cost of dying. And to just that one session where I'm like, I'm actually just going to kill you all.
It's going to endanger everyone.
Yeah, you barricaded the hole and set it on fire and roll inside.
I barricaded the hole and then set fire outside the barricaded door.
It was terrifying as players. Like, we were in a really, like, I think quite a good role play kind of mode, fellowship phase, and then it was just, we just went into this moment where we needed to roll dice, and Callum's whole like demeanor changed. It was like the hole's on fire. What is happening?
Brilliant.
It was a good session.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Sorry that we gave your secret name away, Harefoot.
I don't think we've used the name Harefoot more than maybe once or twice in this entire session.
No, I mean, very inconsistent. Everyone, don't call me Malbeth in front of other people. It's I'm being pursued. Okay, whatever you say, Malbeth. Have you met our friend Malbeth? That's Malbeth over there.
I think it was like every time we met a new person, we were like, oh, let's introduce the party. This is Malbeth. Let's tell you everything about him.
And then when we're on our own, we're like, Malbeth, no, it's Harefoot, isn't it?
It's sort of famous, like, Baggins? Yes, I know a Baggins. Frodo Baggins. Oh, dear. Well, seemed to have gotten away with it because he survived. I mean, no, he survives later on because he was in that one shot, so it's canon in our game now.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us, Malbeth. Brendan.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And that's us for today. Goodbye. I don't know what to say. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
What do we normally say? I can't remember.
The road goes ever on and on. No. Traps win games.
Traps wins game. No emails except on party business. And comments, suggestions, and questions to thefellowshipphase@gmail.com. The long year turns to its close. Much we have accomplished these last seasons. Our fellowship disbands, but is not broken, and we will return
on the next episode of The Fellowship Phase.